We're here with Andrew Moulder, the leader of the Canadian Action Party, Dr. Andrew Moulder, I should say. First off, I'd like to ask you, what's your background as a doctor?
I entered the university in Ontario in 1987, and I attended the equivalent of 6 different universities across Canada. I completed a bachelor's degree in biological psychology, a master's degree in child development and language development of children. Went on to a PhD at the University of Ottawa in clinical experimental neuropsychology, did a subspecialization in cognitive neuroscience. Went on to the University of Toronto and completed my doctorate thesis in electrophysiology, looking at how the brain processes information. Did my PhD comprehensive exams on acquired brain injuries. My clinical training was in brain and behavioral assessments, and from there went on to medical school at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and I graduated there in 2000, and went on from there into residency training into psychiatry, neuropsychiatry. So my background training is by and large in the brain and behavioral and neurosciences is what my area of specialty is. The Canadian Action Party is a federal political party in Canada, which was established by Deputy Prime Minister Paul Hellyer in 1997. Mr. Hellyer was the Deputy Prime Minister under Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and Mr. Hellyer foresaw, even back in the late 1990s, the direction to which our country was headed towards losing its sovereignty, losing control, and had already lost its control at that point of its monetary control and sovereignty. And he realized that a new vehicle was required in order to advance for buying of the people on multiple fronts that affects the average everyday Canadian. And he was seeing that for buying of the people was being replaced serially with the idea of corporate rule, which is where we are at today. William Lyon Mackenzie King in 1930 nationalized our Bank of Canada. Our bank, that means your bank. Our bank belongs to citizens. In fact, in Canada, in North America, Canada has the only publicly owned bank that exists. And this Bank of Canada that William Lyon Mackenzie King nationalized prints our money and provides money, actually loans money to society to fund our infrastructure. So by example, by using our Bank of Canada to fund our infrastructure, we pay ourselves interest rather than some foreign or some private banking cartel. So our Bank of Canada, by belonging to us, we borrowed from it, we print the money, and then on that loan we pay ourselves back interest. So we paid for our St. Lawrence Seaway, we paid for our Trans-Canada National Highway, we got through a depression, we got through the Second World War, and we had an $18 billion national debt. Fantastic. But in 1974, as a condition of joining at the time this G7, this group of 7, which became the G8, which is now the group of 20, this was following something called the Milton Friedman School of Business in Chicago. And they thought, well, it's better to give the banking industry of countries to the private markets and let it be handled there and go with the ebb and flow. But as a condition of being a part of these groups, nations have to give up the control of issuing themselves their own credit, of loaning to themselves. And because we chose to do this, because we thought being part of this group of 7 or group of 8, now G20, was a good thing for Canada, we stopped using our Bank of Canada to fund our infrastructure. We don't borrow from ourselves anymore. We borrow from the private banking cartel. And what has happened by doing that is a condition of being part of this greater group. You know, when 80% of the Canadian economy comes from domestic trading within our country, to give up this right to lend to ourselves is absurd. Because what has happened? We've gone from an $18 billion deficit to up to a $588 billion deficit, of which about 95% of that is compound interest. And money, we're paying interest to who? Well, there's no person out there who has a Canadian flag, who lives in Canada, who we pay $60 billion in interest, both federally, provincially, and at the municipal levels too. We're paying someone else interest on the money that we can print and produce ourselves and lend it to ourselves to fund our infrastructure, to fund our social programs, to fund our education for our university students who are also being put in a debt trap. But as you give up control of your currency, and William Lyon Mackenzie King said it most poignantly when he said this, he said, you know, the issuance of the credit and currency is the state's most precious resource. And once you give up that control, it matters not who makes the laws of the land, because usury, once in control, will wreak havoc on any nation. And this whole new world order ideation is a bunch of banking and intellectual elites that basically see the same sort of mentality. Control the economy, control the issuance of currency, you control the nation. And now control the food, you control the people. And this is how the entire thing, by incremental changes the laws. Better for the corporations, the average citizen is out in the wind. And then when it comes down to going to battle here, the corporations can take out the mom and pop operations, and then you basically become under this whole feudalistic state. Historically, the world has learned that the brute force, either military, the German regime during the Second World War is a good example, to try to take over a large territory by military industrial actions, that society will stand up for its rights if they see some significant change coming that they haven't had participation in, or had a chance to vote or discuss, or had their input to say whether they find this acceptable or not. And the people who want to impose changes to bring us to one global union, countries, sovereign countries being ruled by a self-appointed intellectual and banking elite is what they truly are. That they realize that they have to go against the individuals in society. And individuals in society, when they see a large change coming, they balk at it, because you can see the beginning and the end. You can see the end of this tunnel of this pictures being painted for us that we want to give up our rights and our sovereignty by our own free will. If we can see the end goal from the very beginning, we balk at that. And those who want to impose change on us and maneuver us to a certain position of their own design recognize that. So by incremental changes, it's kind of like stealth underneath the radar, and each day another piece gets changed. And these are being touted in security and prosperity partnerships, which are security and prosperity for the elite, and nothing secure or prosper for the individual average Canadian citizen. And trade agreements that say that it's for our better good as a nation, to be able to have freedom of movement of people, of goods, and regulations on tariffs. That all these slow stepwise changes is a way to subtly change the laws of the land and switch it from being there for and by the people to for and by the elite individual groups, corporations by and large, that serve to benefit the most. So by doing incrementally these changes in our laws and our land, then one day we'll all wake up and say, oh, that's just the way it is. But it was not supposed to be that way. You can come across a border with an army with all of your military machinery, and people say, oh my gosh, we're being attacked. But right now we're being attacked, but incremental changes is the way that people don't see that the arrows and bullets and guns and cannons are blazing at us, and we don't recognize that. If you get into an elevator and there's 20 people on the elevator, and 19 of them are facing the back of the elevator, well, by social conformity, although the right thing to do is to face the front of the elevator, because that's where the doors open, to fit in with the greater crowd, you turn around and face the back. Don't know why, which is what seems to be the status quo.
These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before.
And then people are complicit here by the same mentality, because those who seek to enslave us, those who seek to usurp our rights, those who seek to steal the sovereignty of our nations, and those who seek to change our laws to fit the greater good, to harmonize us, are painting a story that this is for our good. And people do not know. Even our elected officials don't go in and read the fine print of all these trade laws are going in there and say, oh my gosh, that's a bad thing for our country. But when these people recognize this is a war, and we really are at a silent war here for our nationhood, and not just Canada, all nations are under the same sort of threat of attack, is that those who seek to enslave us realize that the popular opinion is critical, and for their means is that how do you control the opinion of a population of individuals? Well, you buy up their media, you buy up their television and programming, you bombard them with the same message over and over again. And again, this slow incremental changes that you're brainwashed as a society to believe this is for your greater good, this is inevitable, it's going to go down that way, and we all basically follow along by what we're being told, led like blind sheep. We are complicit because we don't know any better. We are held in the dark. We have darkness being painted for us as light, and we're all like moths being attracted to that light because that's the collective story we're being told. If you have a nation who has its media, whether it is in print or television or journalism, which is controlled by a common theme, then you only hear one voice. And those who offer a different point of voice, if they're different from the rest of the group, then they're kind of like the individual in the elevator looking the wrong way. And that's a conspiracy. You're either crazy, you are making things up, and that's not what we believe. But as a society, we all once believed that the world was flat. And that was the status quo. And Christopher Columbus was looked at as could have been called conspiratorial, but he ostracized from the society as a whole because he held beliefs that the rest of the population did not hold to be true. And that's what's going on right now. The beliefs we hold to be true are being sold to us in our media and outlets and across the nation under a singular voice owned by the very same people that actually are seeking to move us in this direction. And those of us who can see through this nonsense and can see the truth, and you can see the stepwise progression of what they're doing. We're standing we're looking the wrong way in the elevator. We're looking the right way, but the rest of our citizenry are being held up into this gauntlet of looking backwards, and we got to help change them around. And the conspiracy here is real. It's called capitalism. And it's called capitalism without restraint. Not that capitalism is bad, but there's no satiation. It's never happy. It can never get enough. And unfortunately, those seeking to do it are the trillion-dollar corporations. And the average citizen in Canada, we're left here as a society scrambling for crumbs, looking for help, looking for support. Poverty is rampant. The older people in our community have no services. Our pension plans are being eroded. Our country is being bought and sold on chopping blocks. Our Parliament Hill is like a five-star hotel. It's for stakeholders and shareholders, and Canadian people are no longer there. This is a concern, and they don't know. So call us conspiracy theorists. It's the truth, and you can see the truth. And I'll stand, and I look for anyone else to stand. I'll stand behind people who see the truth, because the truth is there for you to find. If you're too busy scrambling around trying to hold your life together, pay your bills, pay your taxes, take care of your family, work for a job that puts food on the table and pays your mortgages, then you have no time to go look at this. Some of us have said, look, we see a problem here. And once you're outside that box of the propaganda they give you, you can't plug yourself back in. You can't pretend it does not exist. And then the more and more you see, the more and more you can see through the lines of, oh, here's a new news story, what's happening. Well, you can see that little node in the progression to where it's going to go, and you can chart it like a regression line. And society doesn't see that regression line. But it's not conspiracy. It's a plan. And it's a belligerent plan to seek to enslave nations under someone's global scheme of a totalitarian government, that we all work for one great new world order. Who's the king? Who's the pharaoh? And as citizens, we're stomping straw for this pharaoh, not knowing who they are, and we're paying taxes to them, and they're using our own taxes to go fight us. We need to wake up, because our country is being lost daily, and there's not going to be a Canada left in the decade to come. This idea of a globalization or a global totalitarian political scheme where the masses are regulated and controlled by the few is nothing new in society. It goes back millennia. This has been a common theme of those who seek to profit us and to oppress us and to hold us in checks and balances. That this whole idea has been tried repetitively, But a new world order, from what I'm referring to, goes back to the whole idea of what's going on right now. You have three primary groups that have been working on this for some time, more pronounced since the Second World War, but there are three key groups involved, and this is the Council on Foreign Relations in the United States. Its equivalent, or its sister arm in Canada, is the Canadian Council of Chief Executives, which is about 150 executives of corporations which control over $3 trillion in assets in Canada. The Trilateral Commission, which is by and large looking for this world integration. And the Bilderberger Group, which also coming out from the Second World War, which is a group of individuals who see this whole new role for society, building this global elite of integrating all of the countries together under one global single parliamentary command, which is frightening. The reason why we switched to democracy in the history of politics and the controls of nations was because we found that the kingships and the lordships and the feudalist states were corrupt. And you have individuals who are profiteering and basically making the whole population stomp straw for Pharaoh, whether they recognize it or not. And that's what's going on right now in many sectors across Canada. So a new world order is being sold to the populace as being something that's good for us, for our own security and our own prosperity. It's not been voted on. Public are not even aware it's going on. But it's all part of these steps of changing the laws of the land, where you have regulatory bodies and corporations dictating what happens in nations. And we end up losing our nationhood and our sovereignty, which is quite frightening. Nation states have their own personage and their own identity and their own rules and regulations that we as Canadians deem certain features of our society, whether it's in our social programs, whether it's in our Constitution, whether it's in our Charter and Rights and Freedoms, the laws that regulate our land, our energy, our control of the infrastructure of our state, what our collective hue or flavor is as a nation of collective individuals as a whole. Every nation is different, and that is what partly defines you as a nation, and it makes your individuality in your own country for your country. That's why we have borders here. Our group of individuals in this nation believe these things to be true, and that makes the things that happen to define that nation as a collective entity is a produce of the individual collective will and ideas of the individuals of that state as a collective majority. But when you just basically railroad all of that, the individuals that self-define themselves as a group, as a mosaic of individuals in that group, this is our nation, and this is what we believe, and this is what we hold to be valued in our society as a whole. When you supersede that across multiple borders, whether it's Canada, United States, Mexico, South America, Europe, Asia, you erase that individual identity. And it's kind of like being indoctrinated as a military recruit, that they bring you into the military. They strip you of your clothes, they shave off your hair, they put you in a uniform, and now you're marching to the same drum. And you're propagandized. You change your identity into being conformist to what the greater group is that you're being a part to. Because as soon as we merge into a global economy, or we call it deep economic integration right now, and pray to heaven forbid, a singular currency called an Amero, equivalent to the European Union, what they have over there, then we're lost. We'll never be able to get this back. In generations to come, we'll never be able to reclaim which is rightfully Canadian. And so if you have the resources, and if private banks are willing to lend money to our government to fund our infrastructure or to pay for social programs, then they're lending it to us on the behest that, they realize as a country, a nation, we work well and we have a good credit. Well, then that same good credit is our bank and say, okay, for our own bank, we will lend you the money and you can pay back yourselves. People in the United States have tried this before. Abraham Lincoln did it with the greenback, and John F. Kennedy tried to go that way as well. But those who control the monetary system, the Rothschild dynasty, if you will, the kingpins of the international banking, they recognize this. And Amschel Rothschild, he said, let me control the issuance of currency and credit of the nations, and I don't care who you put in power, because they know, control the money, you control the nation. And in society, we're not aware of this. But this is all part of this whole globalization scheme that's happening right now. If you control the money of the world, you can put a run on any bank. You can even go into the gambling strips, and you can even go into the banking in Hong Kong, Macau. If you want, if you have all the money, you can control the rest of the economy. It's kind of like banging the side of a plane and causing a reverberation down that plane, that you know where the reverberation is going to go. But if you want to control countries and economies, and if you want to be able to manipulate them to your own advantage down the road here, then you can create crises, whether it is the price of gas, whether it is the price of rice, whether it's the price of food, whether it is the housing, whether it's the interest rates. You create fear, and you create desperate need of those you are trying to bring towards your little end pen there. And so when you drop the economies, and you steal billions of dollars like a bunch of thieves from countries right before their very eyes, then all of a sudden the economies are crashing, and people are now more open. We need help. And so those who want to help us are those who are putting us in the need their help. And when we go reach for that help, it's basically taking the next step into that next pen where they're moving us forward. If, as part of your goal, is to integrate economies, we call it deep economic integration, and integrate their economic structures, then countries don't want to give up their economic structures freely. And if things are going well for the people, then they say, well, thank you for offering us this Amero or North American Union or one common currency across the North American continent, but we're happy with our economy now, we're happy with our own currency, and we don't need any help right now. But if you throw a man or a country into quicksand, and then all of a sudden they'll clutch at straws, and the straw that they'll clutch at, you already have for them, but they won't reach for it unless you create the crisis and put them in there. So this economy dropping is design. The Depression was designed. You know, you had in 1913 in the United States, when they created this Federal Reserve Bank, it's a J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Rothschild group. They have all these plans. Like if they want to control the currency of the nation, they will do that. And if they want to move it towards a different sort of unified model, which they're going to right now, then they'll create the catastrophes and calamities required in order to move you forward. By example, if you want to go enhance your military-industrial complex, well, you need some crazy sort of thing that the whole world's going to see that, oh my God, we're under threat. 9/11 seems to be a good example for that. It's not much different from the way it was for the Second World War. No one can get the United States into this battle, in the European battle, so Pearl Harbor emerged. And people had advance warning of that as well.
Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor. A year has passed, and we do honor to our beloved dead who fell before the sneak Jap. Each day this week in motion picture theaters throughout the land, Americans are remembering with vengeance in their hearts. Tears, too. Why not?
If you want to move a population as a whole and galvanize their common thinking as a one galvanized response, and we all agree this, then they give you their will freely to go take them to where you already want to go. If you throw them in that quicksand and then you pass them that straw, and a drowning man will grab at anything. They have to make us drown first, because we're not going to grab unless we see we're drowning, and they're drowning us. The systems are being set up here have got more to do with investment and trade rather than for the individual person in society. You use the Security and Prosperity Partnership as an example. Security. And 911 sort of brought in this whole area. Now we can use terror and fear. These terrorists are coming at us, and they're going to help and hurt you. You need us as the collective military-industrial complex to come, and your nation, to protect you. Do you know how big the borders are of Canada? If somebody wants to come in here with a bomb or any otherwise, they can waltz across our country any way they want. There's no way you'll ever be able to put up any boundaries that will protect our country from every border it thinks of. There's no way to do it. It's impossible. So that already is a ruse. If someone wants to go harm your country, they will do it. If they want to get in your country from within or from without, they will do it. And so security, that's a ruse. And now prosperity, deal with that. What's prosperity about? There's nothing prosperous here for Canada in these agreements. There's nothing prosperous here for the average Canadian citizen. The prosperity here is for those who are actually spending the money drafting these legislations. And the legislation is being drafted to improve trade and sale and movement of cheap labor from Mexico into our nation and take up jobs that belong to us, move manufacturing out, bring cheap goods in from other countries, and take away the rules and the tariffs and trade agreements that we had in place that were beneficial for Canada. But Canada is like David, the United States is like Goliath, and Mexico is even beneath David. Well, what kind of agreement are you going to get in place with Goliath where it's going to be to your advantage? They level the playing field. They manipulate what you got. Even the North American Free Trade Agreement, Canada did not get what it asked for, but the United States got both the concessions that they wanted, and now they are in our country, and they own our country. Everything's been sold. What is good about these agreements? North American Union, I'm sure to a certain extent there's some benefit to moving goods across borders in a more generic way that frees up freedom of movement of goods. But it's much beyond that. It's harmonization of the laws and regulations of the lands that define each individual, the nationhood in the United States, the nationhood of Canada, the nationhood of Mexico. And you give up those rules and regulations, and you give up the way to create those rules and regulations, and you make them susceptible and being written by regulatory bodies, outside orders of council, outside of Congress, outside of the will and eyes and perspective of the Canadian people. But that's not Canadian people anymore. Our country is being defined and shaped by regulatory bodies, by corporations, who have no accountability whatsoever to the Canadian people, and not by blood, not by birthright, or any concern for the health or welfare or the environment or the prosperity of our country. And that's a concern. So I don't see that this harmonization, unionization is good for the Canadian people, period. Never was, never will be. It needs to stop. Like the analogy of being in the elevator, people need to turn around. The only threat to democracy, and these people who are pushing this agenda know this, is an informed, educated, participatory democracy. And we're not participant. And we're choosing to be misinformed by the propaganda given to us, and we're not educated on these issues. We haven't gone out there to generally seek what they are. So what people can do, they have to recognize and realize that our country, Canada, is no different from the United States. We have, by and large, a bi-party system in Canada. You have your liberals and you have your conservatives. In the United States, they have Republican and Democrat. But society, individuals as a whole, we get all excited at election time, and we elect an individual who's been appointed to that position to go fulfill that role, and the people who are appointing them are the very people who want to march us down to this whole globalization North American Union. So we perceive as democracy. We collectively keep voting in the people with the colorful posters, the most advertising on TV.
We're tired of fear, we're tired of division, we want something new, we want to turn the page. The world as it is not the world as it has to be.
What gives them the power to become in power of our nation and be puppeted by this shadow government behind these nations is our collective free will, which we give willingly because we think that, you know, the person who has the most propaganda, most media, most best jingle to their campaigns is who we're going to go for. We don't even know what the issues are. And in these campaigns where we elect these individuals into power, we don't even hear these issues about our sovereignty of our nation. Canada and Canadians needs to step back and needs to create a government for, by, and of the Canadian people. Vote for themselves, not for these people and these different parties that have been usurped by the very groups that seek to march us towards this singular drum. And it's not about us as individuals, it's about the truth. But when people can now finally see the truth with their own eyes and understand that people come to their own conclusions, not by something we've told them, and not by something they've been sold in propaganda. They can see and understand in themselves, because as I said earlier, an educated, informed, participatory society is the only threat these people who want to enslave us fear. So we have to educate each other. We have to make each other aware. And we have to become informed. But then we have to become active. It's not enough just to know. We don't need believers anymore. We need doers. And the doers right now are the average citizens standing up, organizing, and coming together under a common good to go save themselves. Because Canada is in peril. And we're not alone. And this whole North American Union globalization is not inevitable like 1 and 2 people believe in Canada. It's not. It can be stopped. And if people who sit here since the time of Confederation, who put our country together, could fight and give up their lives to save this country, how dare we, as individual citizens in the 21st century, sit back idle and say it's inevitable. Our country is going to this new world order and this new global elite. Save your country. And we can do that. And Canada is no different from the same patriots and nationalists in the United States or other countries. We're fighting a war together. Whether we're individual citizens, different countries, we have to fight the same people together. We need to come together, get out there, educate, inform your fellow man. Do not be embarrassed. Do not be shy. Who cares if they call you conspiracy theorists? This is the truth. Canada needs to come together and create 308 electoral district associations across this nation, put themselves in power, vote themselves into government, and then retake what is being taken from them by stealth and lie and propaganda. And unless they do that, there is not going to be a Canada in the generations to come. And we're less than a decade away from this happening. And even Canada must be Codex Alimentarius compliant by 2010. We are losing our nation before our very eyes. We are at war. The other side is playing for keeps. And Canadian citizens are not standing up for this great country. And we need them to. And from my perspective, the Canadian Action Party is the only vehicle towards which to achieve that end for the people, by the people, of the people. Because it's not about being better than one's fellow man. It's about helping one's fellow man become better. And our nation needs our help. And we need the citizens of our nation to stand up, stand strong, stand free, and vote themselves into power and take back what is rightfully theirs and their children to come.